keep an eye on the oceans flowing into ponds. Because I really think that that's really what's going on out there. The audience isn't going anywhere. They're spreading out into individual ponds.
All right.
Oceans to ponds. There's my
Oceans
quote.
to ponds. Step into the world of success with Your Brand Amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I always love it when I meet people who have a solution that I didn't even know I needed, and that I know so many other podcasters need as well. You know that I've been podcasting for about 5-6 years now. I had a little radio show in Houston before that. And my guest today has a very long history, I guess I will say, in radio and in finding out what works for mediums, where audiences are going, and how people can monetize those audiences. So Jeffrey Specter, you're the founder and CEO of CodeADX. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, we met very recently at PodFest just in January 2025, which was amazing. And before we get into that, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your background. Your whole background is essentially in radio, in advertising. Was this something that you were always in love with or passionate about, this medium and figuring out ways to connect people?
Yeah, I mean, coming out of college, I got involved in college, and I went to Ithaca College. I was a business communications management major. So I'm like the only guy that actually did what they went to school for. So when I got out of college, I just ended up at a radio station in Boston, which turned out to be a very famous station. It's called Kiss 108. And, that was just an incredible experience. And then I moved around the country. From Boston, I went to Los Angeles. And then from Los Angeles, I went to Chicago. From Chicago, I went to Philadelphia, building and managing, some of the bigger radio stations, Power 106 in Los Angeles. And when I ended up in Philadelphia, along the way, the industry was selling all itself and consolidated. And we ended up being a company that had 450 radio stations, and we sold ourselves to what is now iHeart. So when we did that, I sort of took the package and went down the entrepreneur path.
Wow, you just summed up your entire history of radio in about 30 seconds. I love it. But I would love to hear a little bit more about that. You've been, what attracted you to radio? Or was that that's the first job that you got out of college, and then, you found that you really loved it?
Probably a combination of both. I mean, obviously, I did some of this stuff in college. I like music, and it was either work of a record company or a radio station. And I remember way back when I just ended up at a radio station. And I just happened to end up at a radio station that was like the station that the entire music industry put its focus to. So, you'd walk in and Madonna would be in the lobby, stuff like that. And so it was a lot of fun. Radio's not so fun these days.
Yeah.
Then it was.
Yeah. Well, you touched a little bit about that with the consolidation. Like many industries, big conglomerates come in, kind of take up all the small guys, put them together to create better packages, whether that's so they have bigger listenership, they can get more advertising revenue, they can say that they're number one. So you saw a lot of these things. I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And then, you stayed a little bit in the medium. I mean, you jumped out of radio into podcast world, but
I still have my foot in the other world because I have another business that how we got into podcasting is because I started a business that provides streaming technology and music discovery for radio stations. And along the way, I started to see how consumers were using online technology, right? How they were interacting with music and streams. I was just in the beginning of the initial streaming for radio, which at that point, it was about, podcasts, as you know, came out of radio. And so the mechanism to monetize streaming radio was, ads, but they were using ad injection, and ad injection is really what powers podcasts right now. Mm-hmm. So it's a long way of me saying I kind of was in the very beginning of the technology that was putting ads into radio streams, but I also had this background of selling radio commercials, regular radio commercials to, car dealers and bars and ad agencies from Boston to Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, all over the country. But then also having to train people all around the country because I started to take on other roles. So I had this unusual mix of how commercials actually work, mm-hmm. and how is the technology make commercials get delivered online. And then I saw what was going on with podcasting, and I'm like, well, they're just taking the technology from radio and they're doing a better job of delivering audio messages than radio is doing. And, so things started to morph together, and I opened up this other business to kind of put those two worlds together of the background that we had.
Yeah. Well, I was telling you before we jumped on, I listened to the radio, the actual radio, in the car on the way to school with my daughter in the mornings. And then once I drop her off, I turn to podcasts because it's lighthearted. It's just background music, and maybe they have some kind of, competition or something fun so she can go to school, like, not stressed out. We're not listening to the news, very lighthearted. And then I can turn to podcasts for information that I actually want to get and my entertainment. We're obviously on a podcast right now as well. So I'm all in on this medium. But one thing that people do have a hard time with is monetization. You mentioned that essentially podcasting has just plucked the methodologies that were existing already in radio and put them into the podcast ecosystem. We've talked about this, the fact that I'm part of an ad network. You have to have a certain number of downloads to be part of this network. And I listen sometimes to see what ads are playing and if they really make sense for my podcast, or if it's just I'm a number, right? And I'm being really frank because I want people to understand this ecosystem, because people who are listening are trying to figure out how to make advertising work for them. And then there are also people who are listening who have podcasts or want to start a podcast and don't know how to monetize. And so that's where you came up with a new model, because you saw that, wait, if we're just applying old methodologies to this, quote, 20-year-old new,
new world.
world.
Yeah.
It's eventually, it's not going to work as effectively. And there are going to be a lot of people who are disheartened, a lot of the small players who are not going to be able to monetize and just going to feel like they wasted their money starting podcasts and trying to bring something to the world.
Yeah. So you sort of bring up, I look at it as there are three core problems, two on the podcast side, one on the brand side, but they're all related. So on the podcast side, the beauty of a podcast, except for a few tiny ones that basically are like radio stations. They're so big, they have the audience of a radio station. But in most cases, the 97% of podcasts out there, they're about exactly what you described with your daughter, right? You go to work, you're listening to this mass media outlet because it's giving you things that you want, but then you switched into this micro media outlet because you got what you want there. Now you want to focus. And obviously we're seeing a huge shift in the world that way. I mean, with everyone screaming and yelling, it was the podcast election, whatever. All that to me means is that you have a migration from mass media into micro, all right? Or I call it sometimes the oceans and the ponds. Okay? Yeah. The same listeners, probably even more listeners, but they're now being spread out in all these places. That breaks the model because podcast ads are based on the ability to be bought and sold the exact same way that network radio is. They're bought by similar type of ad buyers and systems, and the sellers are very similar when you go behind the scenes to know who's selling all this stuff in the back room, the radio people. And they're using a metric that is called cost per thousand. I'm sure everyone's really heard of that. Very few people really understand what cost per thousand means. The M in thousand in CPM means 1,000. So you are selling bundles of listeners in 1,000, like gallons per cost per gallon, right? And so you can sit and you can argue, am I getting $5 a thousand or $10 a thousand or $20 a thousand? And actually, it sort of really doesn't matter because in most cases, the definition of moving from that ocean to the pond is you have this more niche, closed, smaller community. You have less people. There are more ponds, but there's less water in the pond. So by definition of that, and that's just a fact, that's just happening everywhere. If you're selling the value of your pond to an advertiser and you only have 2,000 people in your pond, that means you got two bundles of 1,000 people. They're going to pay you, okay, you got $10 a thousand, here's your $20. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So what's happened here is that the CPM model, which was what drove radio and drove the migration into podcasting, just doesn't work for the overwhelming majority of the industry. And that causes a problem on the advertiser side because it's really difficult to buy podcasts as an advertiser. It's complicated. And one of the reasons, the easiest way you look at why it's so complicated is everyone's moving into these ponds.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It used to be, when you're radio, there are like 10 people come in, see the media buyer. The media buyer has 5 places they're going to buy out of the 10 people. They go to lunch, have a martini. There you go. And then they came in with trading desks to try and replicate that. But the fact of the matter is, these audiences are now become so spread out. And even if you could go reach those audiences, there's not a lot of value to that pond owner
Mm-hmm.
to be compensated by the way you want to compensate them, which is on how much water they have in their pond. So I sat back and I kind of looked at this with friends of mine, and we've been in the business for a long time. We're like, this is broken. It works for the aggregators. It works for, ad networks that are taking all these ponds together. And they're going to the media buyer and saying, I'll give you all these aggregated ponds. But at the end of the day, still that pond owner is splitting up at best their tiny little piece based on the amount of water they add in their pond. They don't make any money. And so the system's kind of broken. So my solution to this was to come up with a way to monetize the individual in the pond, not the group of people. And so that's where we came up with commissions. Yeah. So if we could actually track the person, watch them make the sale, tie a commission payment directly to that sale, now you're monetizing a handful of people. So I don't care how small your pond is, if you're getting 15, 20% commission on a $200 purchase, it doesn't take many purchases for that to add up. So there's almost no podcast out there that can't make decent money when they're being paid for their influence versus being paid for the amount of impressions they're generating. Impressions is how much water you have in your pond.
Yeah. This reminds me of the days when I was in the magazine world. And I started out on the marketing side. I had launched marketing for publications. And then I moved into, by the end of my tenure, I was Western sales and marketing manager for non-endemic. So I had like 17 publications. And so for video game publications, that meant I'd try to get soft drinks or apparel. Well, I mean, you know this, but I'm explaining it more for the audience's sake. So all the things that were not video game advertisers into those magazines, or if it was a parenting magazine, all the things that were non-parenting items into the magazine. And that was much simpler because we didn't actually have to prove our audience numbers. I mean, at some point you do, but we had good guesstimates. You could eventually see how many subscribers you had and then estimate how, you put out X amount of publications across all the newsstands and you could kind of figure out how many of those were actually being sold. So there was a little bit, but it was a lot easier to use a CPM basis or use this kind of basis to bring in a lot of money to the magazines. Now we turn and see, we've seen the world of influencer marketing, content creators on social media platforms, where they've also tried the CPM model. But again, it hasn't always worked because we've seen that large, quote, influencers may have a lot of people following them, but that doesn't mean that they have a lot of reach. They don't have a lot of people who are like really invested all the time. And so that's one thing I really loved about your product, about CodeADX, is that it doesn't matter the size. If you have a really engaged audience, you can monetize.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the secret sauces that we do is because, people say, well, are you an influencer platform? And I'm like, I'm a hybrid. Try and take the better pieces of an influencer platform, which is a performance, pay per performance, which advertisers love that. I mean, that gets them in the world of what Google is doing, right? Digital.
Yeah.
That's what everyone wants. I don't want to buy on, impressions and hope it works. Prove it to me. And that's audio's big issue with these days. All right. So influencers do a really good job of that. The other way to do that is subscriptions, but that's a whole other conversation. So influencer platforms do that, but they are, and I talk to advertisers all the time. They like those platforms, but they get frustrated with them very quickly because it takes an enormous amount to manage them. They have to get the people in most cases. They got to communicate with them. They got to work with them. They got to send them product. That alone is a full-time job and very expensive. And so, you're dealing with, a lot of mid-level or even smaller brands who want to get in the space. They want to get out of AdSense and they want to get in this space, but they can't hire an ad agency. So you have that issue there. It becomes really labor intensive to operate as a brand influencer platform. On the other side of where we're a hybrid is that, well, I'm an ad network. The beauty of an ad network is you ain't talking to anybody.
Right.
Right? It's like, here's my money. I placed the buy. Either I was able to do it online or an agency, push the button, whoosh, out it goes. I don't have to deal with it. Right. And it can just scale. Yeah. Right. So I wanted to take a system that enabled scaling, but paid on performance. And that's why we call it a hybrid model. Yeah. Because this is different. Normally, the labor is on the advertising side. The advertiser has to kind of target and pick and find the pond and all that stuff. And our system, I tell people, if you took a ad network, Uber, and a dating app and put it in a blender, that's us. All right. We're reverse. The advertiser comes in. They kind of say, all right, I'm going to give your audience this discount, 15% off, and I'm going to give you 15 to 20% commission when they buy with your code. They push the button. When that happens, marketing information is uploaded. That's all they do. So now they don't have to manage anything.
Right.
Where this gets very interesting is that the podcaster is picking the media. The media is not picking the podcaster. So that scales on a labor basis really well for the brand. Now, it doesn't matter. They don't care. They just want the sale. And so I get podcasters coming in and there's, a marketplace. It's like this is where it's like a dating app. They're looking at the deals. They're looking at the profile. They can see all the information, the talking points, everything. We give them a lot of direction. This is how you say it. This is the way you want to do it. If you want to make more money, do this and this and this and this. That's our sauce to help them be marketers. They pick out what they want and they push a button. They tell the brand, I'm going to promote you. The brand has 48 hours to say no. 99%, they say yes. And then the podcaster goes and they promote. When that code is used at the store, we've installed ourselves into the store already. We put that code in the store. So we see the sale. We charge the credit card on the spot of the brand, pay the podcaster their commission. They get that money that night. And it just automatically works. So there's no labor.
Well, and it's so different because I've been on other platforms. Like you said, I like to try everything. So I want to try everything so that I can let other podcasters know what's worked for me, what hasn't. If you want to try this method, here are the things you might want to consider. So I'm on an ad network. Fine. Like to your point, it's a CPM basis. And every month I get a report, but that amount of money at the bottom of that page is not the actual money I'm going to get, because what people don't realize is how many other people take a piece of that pie before you get paid. right?
100%.
Yeah.
No one realizes the ugly truth of that.
Unless you're in advertising. And so, I'm like, wait, okay, so this isn't actually what I get. So what percentage do I need to deduct? And then I'm not going to get this for another 5 months because of the whole sales cycle. So that's the whole complicated thing. The other thing is I've been on apps where they match you can, with advertisers. The advertisers might send you a product, but they want to see immediate results. So if they don't see the number of impressions that they want within a very short period of time, you're not going to get paid. And guess what? Most of us who are at this level, we're working other jobs. This isn't we can't afford to make this our full-time job, right? We're doing this because we really love it. We're passionate about the medium, and because it gives us outlets, whether it's creative outlets, networking outlets, or it has something to do with the work that we do. So there's so many barriers put up for us already.
Oh, this is like you just set me up perfectly.
Well, I mean, and that's the truth, because you're making it easy. The onus really is on me as a podcaster. I mean, I've gone in the system. I've told you, I've applied for some things, got the yes, but I still have to be the one who records. I still have to be the one who promotes it, because I'm not going to get paid if I don't do that. It's not just based on people listening to the podcast. It's based on the work I actually do. But you make it so simple, because it's not that I have to say, and go to this website /YBA or Annika or whatever, right? You've already embedded that. So it takes that step out. So you've really thought through this whole process.
Well, yeah. And so when we started this conversation, I said there are 3 points. There's the point that it's very difficult for the advertiser to get into these ponds, right? CPM breaks the compensation for the show, all right? But the other problem is that, and this is a huge problem, this goes back to my radio programming days, when you do take an ad from an ad network, and this really applies to most people, because if you're in the upper tier where you can really have more control of what you're taking, right, then CPM may be working for you, right? I'll argue this will actually make you more money, but that's a different conversation. My point is that, okay, for at least 90% of the marketplace out there, they're getting served ads that are a horrible fit. There's no context. And they're disruptive. And so, by the way, this is what's hurt radio. Okay. When you hear people saying radio's dying and all this stuff, it plays the wrong music. It doesn't play the wrong music. It plays too many bad commercials. That's radio's biggest problem. And and when I talk to the powers of the be in the podcast industry, because we all come from radio, right? The guys that really know what's going on, right? They're like, yeah, we're going down. I can see the brick wall. We're going right at it, just like radio. And look, hey, you used to run 3 or 4 commercials. Now a lot of people are running 6, 7, 8 commercials in their show. You listen to an iHeart show, they've just turned that into the same ad load that they basically have done in radio. And that is, when you think about the essence of what the podcast is this intimate relationship directly into your ears, right? And you get this bombardment of commercials that don't fit, and it doesn't stop. That just chases people away.
Yeah.
And I have sat in so many focus groups across the country to figure out what audiences like, what kind of music, what turns them away. Why would they push a button in the car? And you'd be shocked what happens. I mean, we wire them up to all this like electronic stuff and dials so we can see what's going on. And you play them stuff and they go, bing, 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 they're gone. And once they're gone, they ain't coming back. So there's this really negative out there that people are playing the wrong commercials the wrong way to their audience. And so that, to me, is the third problem that I think that we're solving, because you pick what you want. You talk about it the way you want. We actually don't want you to record it as a commercial and put it in a commercial break. We want this to be the ultimate baked-in infomercial kind of approach. And the other thing that you talked about is that, hey, I got a job. It takes a while to do these things. We know that. And it's in the instructions that we give everyone. We're like, look, you need to do this consistently for at least 4 episodes in a row. And don't expect results in the very beginning. But after you develop that familiarity, that frequency with your audience, then you're going to start to see them making purchases. And we're seeing that happen. And that's not a podcasting. That's just advertising.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, and I want to talk about a couple things. One is you work with a very specific type of advertiser, one that you found works, that you can vet, make sure that they're going to be the right fit. So can you talk about Shopify?
Yeah. So people ask, okay, well, are you an affiliate link and how do you do this stuff and blah, blah, blah. We built an app. The Shopify store installs our app, and we then plug ourselves directly into the infrastructure. So we're not based on affiliate links. We're based on the code going there. We're inside the shopping cart. So there's not like a fraud issue. The people that we're sourcing, what happens is anybody can install our app. It's a free app for any business, and there are just millions of them. I will look at the people that install, and they can come in, put their credit card down, post a deal. But I'll look at it. If I don't feel that that product meets our standards, which means it's got to be a quality product. If you're just selling the same shirt that you can buy 10 different places, or you're a drop shipper, I'm not junking up our marketplace, right? I don't need 3,000 advertisers in there. I need a couple hundred really good ones. Honestly, 75 really good ones is probably fine. All right. So yes, we curate. We make sure that every advertiser has a story to tell, that there's something unique, that a podcaster can do what they do best with that. Then the podcaster comes in and goes, well, I like this product. I could see how that could fit in. Now, one thing I'll bring, a question you may ask, because we don't send out products, right? And so I've had podcasters say to me, and even stores, well, do we send out the product? And I'm like, no, because on that hybrid model, right? So the system won't scale if they have to send out products. If I do my job right and bring in an advertiser, 100 podcasters.
Yeah.
They're not sending out product to 100 people, right? And I tell podcasters whenever they ask me that, because they do sometimes, I'm like, you don't need the product to promote it. Radio and TV have been advertising products
100%.
for decades and decades and decades. And trust me, they're not getting every product delivered to the studio for a personal trial every time they take an ad. What you can do, and I hear people do this all the time, is, first of all, that's why we give you so much marketing information, product information, so you'll know about it. You make your own decisions. But I hear our podcasters going in and said, hey, I went online and did my research. These guys got 4.5 on Trustpilot. They had 3,000 people. Honestly, that's a better endorsement than said, I used it.
Right. Yeah.
And so by just using these common sense things, my goal here has been to break the walls down and open this up so anyone can make money. I don't care how small your pond is. And any size advertiser can come in, because the majority of these advertisers, they need an agency to buy it, right? The traditional way. And no agency is touching them unless they give them at least 50 grand to test. Not going to happen.
Right.
And so that's why we're getting a lot of advertisers in here that they all say to me, I love podcasts. I just haven't found a way that I can make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is the big challenge. I've had people sponsor my show, I had one person about a year ago sponsor my show and a whole bunch of other podcasts, but they didn't, number one, have a clear system for metrics and deliverables. They were testing things out, but they didn't have not only the system, but what they wanted for their metrics, what they wanted to get out of it. They weren't very well known. So of course you have to create some brand awareness sometimes, depending on what kind of product or service you have. So there is a number of issues. So then they just cut the program off completely. But to me, that's short-sighted. They should have maybe thought about it a little more before they put money out into the industry. They should have had something. This isn't a product that could be in a Shopify store that I'm thinking of, but there are other ways to think through things and think through the advertising, cycle and spectrum that can benefit. And in some ways, podcasters are the new influencers. We are content creators, right? We're trying to bring
The
information.
original, no, you're the original influencers. That's true. And there's a research study came out recently that specifically talked about how podcasting dramatically outperforms influencer platforms.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I can send it to you.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. No. I think Tom Webster from Sounds Profitable sent that to me. But no. But at the end of the day, I think what you're really talking about is activation.
Yeah.
So how does the brand get their product sold? How does the podcaster get the product sold? What's the process for all that to happen? And, I guess in a lot of ways, what we're doing is we've just taken all the restrictions off. So normally on an ad buy, say it this way, do it here, go here, do it this way. It has to run here, it has to run there. And, our whole thing is there are no ad rules, there are no restrictions. This is not about what the brand necessarily thinks you should be doing. This is about what you believe your audience will react to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's no way a brand knows what your audience will react to as well as you do. And so, and I just seen this. So over, from my radio experience, you'd be surprised what sells. And that's the beauty of a podcast and all these ponds, that connection, that intimate, that community to form in that podcaster or host to kind of have credibility at a level that normal advertising really tries to get to, but they can't. And, to me, I just think that what I'm trying to do is unlock all that influence that is wasted out there.
Yeah.
Do it your way. See what happens.
Well, I wanted to ask for a couple of case studies because you shared some really good ones when you spoke at PodFest. That really made, I think, everybody in the audience, our eyes lit up and said, okay, we have to be on this platform.
The best thing, I think I talked about one was Cozy Earth. They're a pretty well-known sheep company. And when I talked about it a couple weeks ago at PodFest, I think I had mentioned that they sold, within a couple weeks, like $7,500 worth of product. Since January, they now have done $20,000.
Wow.
And, but what's key about this is it was a handful of shows. And more importantly, it was it's probably a little less, somewhere around 100 people made purchases.
Okay. That's
100. Well, actually, it was less than 100 because I can tell you right now, the average sale I'm getting out of Cozy Earth is north of $200.
Wow.
So I have one show that has just they found the spot, right? They figured the method that worked for them, and they've made over $2,000. They're not a huge show. They made over $2,000 by just kind of following the process that we give them, in less than 2 months.
Yeah.
About 6 weeks. Yeah. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
But we have other brands that we're starting to see similar results. If you treat this as an ad, if you go in and you pick something and then we give you the talking points and you go, I need to record this talking points and I'm going to put it in an ad break and I'm going to run it a couple times. It may work, it may not. You get a couple buys. But if you treat it as you are marketing this brand, you can blow this thing open.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are amazing results, especially for a show that might have 100 downloads. And you said they made $2,000 in the last couple months. I mean, that's...
Well, they had more than... their audience was bigger. My point is, I don't know exactly what their number is. So let's use thousands. So let's say it was 3,000 is their audience, okay? But out of the 3,000 people, less than 100 of them made a purchase.
Wow.
That's the point. It only takes a handful of people to be profitable, to make meaningful revenue. So I don't care how small your pond is, right? Hey, I only got 500 people to listen to me. I got 250. Yeah, but these may be like close friends. They if they're listening to you week in, week out, month in, month out, they're part of your family. You come in and go, oh my God, I got 41% off at this really cool bedding company. They're gonna buy. 5 of them buy. You blew away anything you'll ever make, even if you had 5,000 people in your or 10,000 in your on a CPM basis.
Yeah.
Blow it away.
Yeah. So expansion plans. I mean, you've gotten this model down. Are you planning to expand beyond Shopify? Are you going to stay in that lane for now?
Yeah, so the first expansion that we're really rolling out right now is because we do see the lines blurring between podcasters and content creators, right? Especially what's going on with YouTube and Spotify. And that's a whole other thing. So we're now making it very easy that you can register as a YouTuber. You don't necessarily have to have an RSS feed. You could just have it. And so we're making it available to YouTubers, and we're going to make it available to Instagrammers and TikTokers, mostly probably Instagrammers, because who knows what happens with TikToks. So we are opening it up to allow other content creators, because we do see that when podcasters use their full reach, when they use their Instagram feed, we give you links to promote when they talk about it, and then, do a marketing campaign in their world.
Exactly.
That's what sells.
Yeah.
That's what sells. As far as other platforms, we'd like to, connect to WooCommerce, which is WordPress, and e-commerce. There are a couple other shopping cart systems out there. We'll probably connect to them. I'm not in a huge rush because, Shopify is the Atlantic Ocean. So if I don't have this Pacific Ocean, I can deal with just the Atlantic for now.
Yeah, absolutely. And where do you see this whole ecosystem going? Podcasting will continue to grow. Obviously, we're seeing video, we're seeing shorts, we're seeing a lot of other things come out of this, like with every other platform.
Well, I think this goes back to what we've been talking about, is that ocean's the ponds. I do not see that going away. Why would it? It doesn't mean that the brands, that the networks and the oceans are going away. No, nothing just erases one to another except for horses and cars. But I definitely see this moving more and more, spreading out. A big opportunity, I think, for the podcasters and also for us is the fact that I wouldn't call a war between YouTube and Spotify, but they are definitely, there's a triangle relationship right now going on in the industry. You have an RSS feed, you have YouTube, and you have Spotify. Yeah. Okay. YouTube is the biggest platform for podcasting. People don't realize that, but that is bigger than anything. YouTube says, hey, you can come in, put your podcast in as a video form, here we go. But what YouTube does is they sell the ads themselves. Right? So you're not out there selling ads. So they'll go, hey, I'll sell the ads myself and I'll give you a cut of it. All right? Right. So you're in that world, you are pretty dependent on size. All right. Spotify's come in and is basically moving to a very similar model. They're not getting away, but they're now trying to push people into, hey, bring your video. We'll do the same. We'll sell the ads. We'll give you a cut the way we give cut to musicians when we play their music.
Yeah.
Same thing. Okay.
But on YouTube, you also have to have a certain following for video. You have to have 1,000 subscribers to start monetizing with their advertisers.
And I think that will go, we'll see where all that, how low they'll open that up. But what both sides are saying is, you can do anything you want in the body of your show, which is a baked-in ad. And that's the sweet spot. And when you really think about what I am, I'm a baked-in ad marketplace. Yeah. All right? So if you are on YouTube, you're a podcaster and you're on YouTube, you may have your RSS feed, but you also have your YouTube version. but you go grab, there's no reason. I mean, you can do business with us and still inject ads. I don't think it's the best experience, but you can do that, right? So you go and you pick out, the deals that you want to talk about, and you talk about it inside the body of your show as it's an organic ad, which is what we want you to do anyhow. Put the links and stuff in the visuals, put them in the show notes and in the YouTube feed, all that stuff. Now you get 100% of that revenue that you generated in your show.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big opportunity.
Definitely.
For us and for everybody.
Yeah. And I think this goes hand in hand with the personalization aspect. We've seen that people want to buy from advertisers who, are authentic, transparent, and creators, I should say. They want more personalization. So thinking about the ocean down to the pond level, people are listening to podcasts that they resonate with. They resonate with the host. They resonate with the content. They feel more attached and in tune with it. And so to them, that is a little more personalized of a brand. In a different way, of course, it's not the same as like personalizing an email to them with a certain color wave of a product or whatever. We don't need to go down those rabbit holes. But I do see this as part of the continuation of what we're seeing overall in the landscape of advertising.
100%. I mean, these ponds, the pond holder gets to decide who they want, let into the pond, including the advertiser.
Yeah.
And that's really, really good for the content.
Yeah.
And that's what's missing right now, because the pond holder is connecting into this feed that is pumping in stuff into their pond and killing the fish.
Wow. With that image in mind. So if you are a podcaster, a YouTuber, is it available now for YouTubers and content creators on other platforms?
Yeah. By the time they see this, yes.
Yes. Okay.
And for some reason, if they don't, they always can email me at Well, first of all, if you have a RSS feed, we have you in the system. You just go to CodeADX.com, click on podcasters, enter your show. We'll have you there. If you happen to be a YouTuber that does not have an RSS feed and you don't see it yourself in there, you can just email me and we can manually take care of you. So you email me at js@codeadx.com.
Fantastic. And if you are a Shopify store that wants to find a new way to reach the right customers at the right time via podcasting, you can also go to CodeADX and click on the other button.
Yeah, click on the Shopify, or you just go into the Shopify App Store, search for CodeADX, hit the install button. It'll take you less than a minute and you're all done.
Nice. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I always ask my guests for a favorite quote, mantra, motto, verse, poem, words that help inspire you to continue ideating and iterating and finding new ways to add value to this industry or to your life.
I think I'm going to stick with keep an eye on the oceans flowing into ponds, because I really think that's really what's going on out there. The audience isn't going anywhere. They're spreading out into individual ponds.
All right.
Oceans to ponds. There's
Oceans to ponds. There we have it. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for being on the podcast today. It's always fun seeing you, and it makes me all inspired to go and see what other brands I want to connect with and make sure I've done my part to promote the brands that I'm going to be promoting through CodeADX.
We're always here to help any of our podcasters. You can always get a hold of us. We'll to tell you what you need to do, how to tweak it better. And we got some killer new products that are coming in over the next couple of weeks. So, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. And thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share a little bit about their journey and some tips and tricks to help your business and your life get a little better every day. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.